Hey, so take just a moment and picture this. It's a year from now, maybe 2, maybe 3, and everything that you currently hope to be true of your life someday, all of your maybe someday I will get to fill in the blank. All those things have come true. You've had the happy ending. It all worked out. You got what you wanted. You went on your quest and you achieved the goal. So you're in bed, you roll out of bed, your feet at the floor, smile on your face. What do you get to do that day? What is true of your life in that world that's not currently true of your life? What is that ideal day, that ideal setup for your life that you don't currently have that you want to go chase? That's the point of this episode. If the whole point of this show is to treat our lives more like an epic quest, to go after the things that we actually want, that we feel made for, that's a great idea. That's inspiring. That's exciting. But it doesn't work if we don't know what we're going after in the first place, right? So that's the point of this episode. Glad you're here. Welcome to episode 2 of Me in the Quest. Well, hey, what's going on? Welcome. My name is Ben Crosswaite. I currently make music under the name Ben in the Family Quest. And this is Me in the Quest. This is a show about doing big, meaningful things in the world, making big, transformative changes in ourselves, and ultimately spending more time doing what we're alive to do. Welcome to my backyard shed, office, creative space. I'm pointing out where I am because, especially if you're watching on video, you'll notice that I'm in a beanie. I've got flannel on because it is extremely cold. It is 12 degrees outside right now on the coast of Maine where I'm recording this. And turns out that running the little heater I have out here while I record is just no good for the audio. So I got it up to like a balmy 49 degrees and then had to cut off the heat. So if you detect an extra little shakiness in my voice, I'm not just nervous and excited and over caffeinated. All those things are true. But I am freezing. I can't feel my extremities. But hey, we're going on epic quests. We're doing big things. We're pushing through the hard things to do what we're here to do. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm putting my frozen toes and my frozen fingers where my mouth is. That's a weird picture. All right. On that note, really glad you are here. Welcome to episode 2 of Me in the Quest. Today we're going to talk about how to start to define what it is our quest is all about. What is the end goal? What is it that we're chasing? So just as a quick overview where we're going, each episode is going to be split into 3 acts. Act 1 is what do we want? What's the problem? Act 2, what do we need to prevail to overcome the problem and get what we want? And then Act 3 will leave with some real practical next steps. What do we do now? All right. So here we go. Act 1, what do we need and what's the problem? So Act 1 for this episode is actually a little bit interesting because we've got these 2 elements that are going to start every episode, right? What do we want and what's the problem? But what's interesting about how I'm thinking about this problem as it relates to having a clear goal to go after is that the problem is actually how we frame what we want. It's how we think about what we think we want, essentially. Let me give you some examples. We say things, and we might say this out loud, but we definitely say this, sort of just in our stream of consciousness, things we say to ourselves. We say things like, I just want to be happier. I just want to be healthier. I'm bored. I'm lonely. I'm unfulfilled. And one point I want to make is there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's just part of human nature, and there's something worthwhile, to kind of look at there. But we can't just stay on the surface of that. Something I've been trying to do for myself with a lot of intentionality lately is really pay attention to those, but then go deeper. Okay, you want to be less bored. Let's dig into why you feel bored. What's missing. What are you actually longing to do that you're not currently do? What did you used to have that you don't have? What, etc. All these abstract, sort of nebulous things I want to be happier. It's just not, you can't go on a quest to happiness, right? These things are byproducts of other changes we're going to make in our lives, but you can't just flip a switch and be happy. News flash. And here's a really important point. When we stay on the surface and we just say things like, I want to be more happy. I'm bored. When we stay on the surface of things like that, that's when we spend 5 hours in the YouTube wormhole, right? Because, well, I'm not bored. Is that what I want to spend my life doing? Watching, who knows what on YouTube? Started out watching a video about how to, craft, and then I'm watching slime videos, and now I'm watching conspiracy theory videos, and now I'm watching Taylor Swift music videos. Like, is that how we want to spend our lives? And I mean, I'm not being critical. This is, I get it. I'm there all the time. That's what happens when you stay on the surface. That's what happens when you say, I just want to be, I'm bored. And you go for the quick fix. I'm sad. That's when you get into, and I'm not going to venture into trying to offer any advice here, but things like I'm sad, I'm not happy as I want to be. That's where you get into addiction. That's where you get into numbing. That's where you get into chasing some sort of chemical change. That's where you get into just distracting yourself with the latest Netflix binge, right? And we're all guilty of this. I'm right there with you. But we can't stay on the surface. That's what happens when you settle for only saying things like, I want to be happier. I'm bored. I'm unfulfilled. I'm lonely. We've got to get beyond that vague cloud that we can't go after. That's chasing the wind, right? So let's talk about what we need to do to get some clarity about what it is we're going after. Because all of the subsequent episodes, as we talk about how to really do this well, how to go on a quest well, we have to know what we're going after. And it'll constantly be shifting. And this is an important idea that the hero always leaves home to chase something. And inevitably, the circumstances are a little bit different. And you're going to face obstacles and things are going to change, and maybe even your desires are going to change as you go, but you still have to have something that you're going after to start the story, right? And being happier, being less bored, those things aren't good enough. They're not clear enough to get us going on our epic quest. So that's the problem. We're not clear. So let's get into Act 2 and talk about how we can fix that. All right, so Act 2, what do we need to prevail? What do we need to overcome the problem and get what we long for? The one-word summation for this episode is we need clarity. We need to get really clear about what it is we're even going after. And we need, kind of alongside that, we need the realization that something like, I want to be happier, I want to be less bored, I want to have a more interesting life, whatever the answer is. Those can be great guideposts, and I think, like I said a few minutes ago, we should pay attention to those, but we need to dig way deeper than that, because that's not nearly sufficient enough. We can't go on an epic quest to, I guess a more interesting life. I'm kind of bored. Like that's not enough. So we need clarity. So the tool for this episode is, I've got this quick exercise. We're going to imagine 2 scenes for our lives. Wow, stuttered there. I think the cold is getting to me. My jaw locked up. It's cold out here. Okay. I'm going to imagine 2 scenes. I want us to imagine 2 scenes for our lives. The first is what you could call the climactic scene. And I actually got this idea from Donald Miller, who's huge influence on this podcast, and I'll talk about him a ton. But this idea of the climactic scene, we want to imagine what that moment is for our lives, where all the tension that's been building about, will they make it? Will they not make it? Will they succeed? Will they fail? All that tension is resolved, and we realized the hero has won. The fight's over. You can breathe a sigh of relief, right? So it's to some extent it's the ring melting in Mount Doom. It's to continue the melting thread, it's the Nazi's face melting off in Indiana Jones. I'm not really sure if that's actually the climactic scene because more happens after that. It's traumatic, a traumatic scene maybe. I love how those movies that are just like rated PG and you're like, oh, this is fine. And then like, I think that was before they had PG-13, right? Actually, I think there's a story where one of the Indiana Jones is why they invented PG-13. I'll have to fact check that, or you can Google it, because that is ridiculous when the face melts off. But anyways, in like Disney movies, there's so many Disney movies. There's sort of these two things that happen in a climactic scene. One, the villain gets killed. There's some moment with the villain where it's like, yeah, that villain's definitely dead. But they also can't really show it, right? Like you're not gonna watch a Disney villain like bleed out from the neck, right? But so the villain, gets crushed by something, thrown off a cliff a lot of times. Villain's dead. That we know it's dead. It kind of fades into the abyss, and okay, villain's gone. Then they cut back, and the hero, you're like, this is the Disney movie where they do it. This is the one where one of the main characters actually dies. It looks like one of the characters dead. And then through some sort of magic or surprise or whatever, right, the hero's not actually dead. And then you kind of go, okay, villain's dead. Probably some extra thing happened. And then we thought the hero was dead too, but turns out the hero's fine. Breathe a sigh of relief. That's a climactic scene. So I want us to start to picture for our lives what that might look like. And I'll walk us through more of that in a second. The second scene I want to talk about is the fade to black scene. This is the very last thing. And the Lord of the Rings one, both in the movie and the book, is so good, with Samwise coming back and saying, he says, well, I'm back. And he's just back in his sort of normal life. But obviously everything has changed, right? This whole idea of like a return to normalcy, or return to the world you came from, but things will never be the same, right? And hopefully for the better. And this is, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, which is also a big influence on this whole podcast. The end of that is what's called the return. So the hero goes on this epic quest, but then returns with some knowledge, with some having done some great deed. It's a return, but things aren't the same. So this goes back to what I talked about in the intro. Let's start to visualize when we sort of just wake up on a normal day in this new reality that's in the future that we've achieved. What does that look like? What do we wake up and do? How do we spend our days? Who are we with? What is not true of us currently that is now true of us in that future? Or vice versa. Like what's a thing that is true of us right now that we don't like or we don't think is very healthy? That then later we can kind of have moved past. All right, so let's get into Act 3. And actually in Act 3, I'm going to share my version of these two scenes to kind of let you into my world a little bit. And then we'll kind of leave with some clear steps on what to do next. So Act 3, we want to talk about what do we do now? What do we do with this information? So first thing we want to do is I think we want to actually start with the final scene. Start to think about for yourself, what does the final scene look like in this future? What do you wake up and do? What's true of your life? Start to really flesh that out. Then reverse engineer that and figure out what a climactic scene, one moment that can sort of represent that, okay, things have changed and now we're in this new era. So just to help you visualize this, I'm going to share some version of what mine is. So it's a little bit sort of embarrassing almost to talk about, just because it's weird to sort of just be super upfront about what your goals are and what you want to be true, because it's frightening, because if you go share this with a bunch of people, whether that's recording yourself and putting it on the internet, or just talking to your friends about it, there's the potential future embarrassment of, hey, remember when you said you were going to do that and you didn't do it? So I get that. There's a little bit of fear. Something I wanted to say is that these big things that we're chasing should feel a little bit embarrassing with how big they are. If our dream doesn't feel a little bit embarrassing or almost silly to talk about, it's not big enough. It's not interesting enough. And we're probably editing ourselves too much for fear of not being able to achieve it. So we need to just turn off that internal, out of breath, I'm so cold. And it's crazy how we will, even if we're just kind of writing in a journal or something, we will edit ourselves because sometimes we're scared to be honest about what that big thing is. We just need to go for it. If it's not a little bit embarrassing, if it doesn't feel a little bit silly, it's not big enough. So with that in mind, my final scene that I imagine, and it goes something like this. I get to wake up every day and make things that I care about. Music, sharing ideas like on this podcast, helping other people do creative things that I'm passionate about, whether it's teaching music lessons or whatever else. I get to wake up every day, come out here to the shed, hopefully with the heat on, or at least not being 12 degrees. I get to come out to work and make things I care about, be creative, share ideas, hopefully make the world a little bit better in a way that I can. And there are enough people interested in how I see the world, interested in the things I make, just enough. I don't need 1 million, just enough that I can pay the bills with that audience. And this means that Erin can quit the job that she has that she doesn't hate, but it's a whatever job. And this would allow us the freedom to, be more location flexible, really shape how we spend our time, where we spend our time. We're not looking to make a bunch of money. We're just looking to build a life where we can really focus on being together as a family, doing meaningful work, okay, that kind of stuff. And then the climactic scene that I picture for this era of my life, at least, is Erin quitting her job. And, maybe I go pick her up from work on the last day and we just kind of look at each other like, end of an era, we did it. And we go out to eat and we get steak and I pay too much for a whiskey cocktail and she doesn't share her French fries because that's what she does. And we laugh and we celebrate that we did it. I don't know if it'll play out exactly like that. Maybe someday we're in a position to do that and she decides she doesn't want to quit her job or whatever. Like the exact details can change and that's okay. But it's a goal that we're working toward. So my hope in me sharing that is twofold. Now you can know a little bit more about me, what it is I'm chasing. And hopefully that also helps get the ball rolling for you as you think about what I mean by this exactly, okay? I mentioned last week the idea of having a notebook, a journal of some kind, whether physical or on your phone, to document the stuff that you're thinking about and working on related to this show. Something like this exercise is really great to actually write it down because your mind will kind of wiggle out of like, no, I didn't actually, like, I didn't say I wanted that. Like it'll try to get out of the hard stuff. But put it down on paper, trap it. It's a great way to really get honest with yourself. So I highly recommend some sort of writing process as you try to sort this out for yourself. That was my phone falling out of my backpack. So yeah, take some time, write, or at least think about these two things. What is a climactic scene, and what is that final scene? Fade to black, credits roll. It doesn't mean like literally on your life. This isn't about like, it's a little bit too overarching to like what I want. I mean, you can do it for your whole life if you want, but I'm talking about like a year from now, 3 years from now, on that era, on that specific goal. The credits roll. You kind of get the warm, fuzzy feeling like everything worked out. What's true in that final moment? What is the world that you've arrived at? And then, in the coming episodes, we'll continue to talk about how to adventure well, how to go on a mission well, how to extract wisdom from what Frodo and all the Disney characters and Harry Potter and Luke Skywalker, what all these characters do, what's true of them that we can steal and kind of implement in our lives in our own way. Last week, I introduced the idea that at the end of each episode, we're doing something called the epilogue, which most of the time is unrelated to the content of the actual episode. If you're watching on YouTube, the epilogue will be popping up somewhere on the screen. Today, I'm talking about a few pieces of advice from one of my favorite thinkers that has gotten me over some really intense resistance to following through on this project. Just in the last 24 hours, even feeling like I was really kind of down on it and scared and coming up with excuses not to do this. But this advice has really been pushing me. And so if you're seeing this, I did it. I published it. I put it out in the world. And so if you're looking to do something that kind of scares you, but you feel like you should do, which is how I feel about this podcast, check out the epilogue. 3 pieces of advice that have really helped me overcome and put this out in the world anyways. All right, we'll see you in the epilogue.